Today's class, we are talking about hooks. And here is a brief introduction about hooks and what you can expect from this class. We follow a framework a lot in Saints College and on Threads called the Proof Promise Plan framework. This isn't mine, it's Hormozy's. It can apply to YouTube, Threads, landing pages. It's pretty universal. I didn't see anyone else apply it to the hook in a Threads post, and that's what we do now. Just for context, you can see these posts that I've been posting over the last few days, but I'll try and pick some of the best ones to show you the potential of what we're learning in this class. Here's one. Did pretty well, 21K views and 120 likes. This is using the hook framework that I'll be sharing with you in this class. This post as well, an anomaly, 1.1 million views, 80 likes. This post here, literally every post you see here is using the hook framework I'm about to teach you, but the ones that do the best incorporate the hook framework the best. Everything I post uses this framework, but it only hasn't been until the last, honestly, the couple of weeks where I've been able to actually use it consciously. Before that, it was just throwing darts in the dark. And that is my promise to you, is if you can apply this framework and practice it every day, and I would say you should, because that is the fastest way you'll learn, you will grow a lot faster than you currently are, because I've not seen anyone else talk about this on Threads. Everyone else talks about copying hooks, and I advocate for that because you can learn what works. But this is how you actually start creating what works. You see in the posts, the promise is that you'll be a better writer at the end of this by being able to get more engagement on your posts. And then I'll explain to you why that actually matters in a second. But in terms of how we're going to get to that endpoint, this is what I want to talk about throughout today's class. So first, I'm going to talk about why this stuff matters. Then I'm going to talk about how I arrived at this framework. Then I'll go through the 101 version. This is the thing that you should, if there's one thing you walk away from after today's class, it's this. Then I'll talk about the 201. If the 201 goes over your head, that's fine. The recording is available. But if you walk away with anything, it's got to be the 101, because that's the thing that will change everything for you. And then finally, we'll touch on some questions. You can put some questions in the chat. Feel free to just speak up. If it is a random question that doesn't relate to what I'm talking about, then probably best to just put it in the chat. If it is related to what I'm discussing, then just speak up and let me know what you've got. So how does that sound? Any questions so far? Leisha, thanks for the thumbs up. Sounding good? Physical thumbs up. Love it, Marcus. Danny, all good? All right. First principles.
There's some big bottle energy on this call, it feels.
There is some big bottle energy. Yeah. I know Alicia's bottle is really just a mug that's probably got 12,000 milligrams of caffeine in it. It's early in the morning for you, Alicia, so that's allowed. Mathilde, welcome. That's our plan. Let's dive in. First principles. Why does writing hooks matter? My thesis for this is that your ability to write great hooks is the single most valuable skill you can develop online, because everything else that occurs in your business is downstream from your hook. Let me explain. We can all agree, and give me a thumbs up and obviously thumbs down if you don't agree, that you need attention in an online business. Okay. How do we get attention? We go to a social media platform. Obviously, if we're talking about in person, then it's a different story. We're online for a reason. So you go to a social media platform to get attention, and you want to take those people from non-followers to followers. Once they become a follower, you can call them a prospect. Then once they become a lead, it basically means that they're going from a follower to a free member. Technically, everyone on the call is a lead. You're part of Saints College. And then the next step is a customer. So from prospect to lead to customer. And technically these are paid members. So people in our paid cohort at the moment fall into this category. But it all starts with attention. Without the attention, none of this other stuff happens. And that is why the hook is so important, because I'll just go to my pinned post because it's an easy example and it's pinned for a reason. This is the hook, right? Let's say one of the 43,000 people who saw this, sees the first sentence. 7 things about threads you need to know, but probably don't. Lots of people will read that and will not be interested in reading what I have to say because knowing about threads growth, as this thumbnail shows, is just not important to them. So they keep scrolling. But what about all the 43,000 who did see this and probably read a little bit more? My ability to capture someone's attention in this first sentence is everything. Because if I can properly capture someone's attention in this first sentence, then they're going to read the second. And if I can retain their attention in the second sentence, they'll read the third. And then when they read this third one, use these tactics to become a powerful threads creator. If someone reads that and thinks, fuck yeah, I want to become a powerful threads creator, they're going to keep reading. And if I can retain their attention through what I'm actually sharing in the body of this long form post, they're reading it like, this is good shit. I like it. It makes sense. I'm learning. This is nice. Cool. Here's a good example. Okay. Tag, swipes. Here's a little crash course. Love it. And then, ooh, what do we see here? I can get more of what I just got. And then they click on this link and they join the community. And as we just saw, not everyone goes through this full experience, but they need to be one before they become the other, at least in my funnel and most people's funnel. If you've got a really low ticket item that's $5, you can skip a lot of these steps. However, the main point about attention remains true. If this first sentence was shit, no one would have gotten to the last part of the post, which is where the conversion happens. And it really is that simple. If the first sentence is shit, everything else in your post is irrelevant because you have not captivated the person's attention enough. Does that make sense, everyone? Does anyone have any questions about that? I can try and explain it differently, but it's probably the most important thing that you can learn online. It honestly, I can't overstate it. And we'll just take a look at a few examples. Hopefully, we're not going to name and shame anyone. Here's one. Be Cozy CEO. I had a guy jump in the comments of a thread I wrote last week that had gone viral. It's now illegal for companies to disseminate fake reviews. Even those first 3 words, it's now illegal, that's got me. The point I'm trying to make here is that, well, this one, definitely. Holy smokes. Yaz, if you're listening to this, perfect. Like spot on. You see this and you think, what's happened? You're intrigued. It's the hook. And then you actually go and read the sentence. The point is, you're not going to start, most people at least, you're not going to start here or here before reading the first sentence. So the first sentence has to be amazing. And that leads to my discovery. I posted over 2,000 times and then it spent over 2,000 hours on threads. The truth has emerged that we need to master one skill, which is hooks. But for the longest time, I haven't been able to tell people how to write good hooks other than to just say, go and check out this resource inside the community, which has a bunch of viral hooks, and then use those and personalize them to your own context, your own topics, whatever. But it just felt incomplete. And then the other day, we were having a call inside the cohort. We started talking about hooks. As I said here, boom, had an epiphany. And then this is where I discovered that every great hook boils down to one universal principle. It's so simple. It's so obvious that once you see it, you will never unsee it. And that is the discovery. This is the breakthrough. This is Hooks 101. And we'll be talking about 2 subsections in this section of the class. The first subsection is just 1 loop, shorts, and the second subsection is 2 loops, longs. If anyone on the call has any short form posts that they would like for me to take a look at live, please put them in the chat. Share the link in the chat, not the copy of the post, but the actual link to the post on threads. That'll be really useful for examples. It'd be helping me out a lot. Let me explain what this first subheading is, or rather the overarching breakthrough, which is that.
Hey.
Yes.
Do you want examples? Do you want examples of like good ones or bad ones?
Both. So
Both.
good ones that you might be wondering, like, oh wow, this blew up. Why? And then yeah, Karen, if you wouldn't mind sharing your post as well, because I remember we are talking about that today. And then bad ones where you might be wondering, oh, I thought this was going to do better. Why didn't it? Any posts that you just want to know more about why they performed in the way that they did. I got a fresh one from Sam. Sweet. So yeah, the breakthrough, everything you post on threads, or rather, yeah, that's the first principle stuff. Next few characters is what the entire class comes down to. That's it. End the call now. Obviously, I'll be going into what exactly this means, but you need to open a loop. There are different types of loops that I will be explaining in a little while. But you're opening a loop, and think about it like a physical circle that's being drawn while someone is reading the first sentence of your post. That is what the loop is. And the more left open that loop is, once the person finishes reading the first sentence, the more effective the hook is. The inverse is also true. The more closed the hook is after someone finishes reading the first sentence, the less effective the hook is. The rest of the content will just not be seen by many people at all. So, in that sense, it's a waste of time. It's not a waste in time in terms of the practice and the time, like effort you're putting and learning, but it's a waste of time in terms of the content that you want to share will just not be read. So, does anyone have any questions about the stuff in this box so far? This is the foundation that we need to lay, and then we'll start going into more specific examples. Anything about this so far that anyone has questions about?
I don't have a. It'll be good to see what that looks like in practice because I'm a little
Yes.
bit confused by the language of open and closed.
Yeah. So, on that note, let's take a look at some of these examples. Cool. So, we've got a short there from Sam, and we've got a short here from Karen, and then another one from Karen. This is a long, which has done very well. Last time I looked at this, it had 1.1K.
I know. I want to stop. It's making me crazy in a good way.
I'm very excited to talk about why it works so well because I've been thinking about it, and this concept, it'll make much more sense once we dive into it. Sam, I think there was one more. Marcus, did you have any that you wanted to take a look at?
Yeah, I can certainly
Please.
just put in. Should I put in my 185K one?
Do that one, and then maybe we can contrast it with one that didn't perform as well as you would have liked. And if you're a bit unsure as to why,
I've got plenty of those.
I
Yeah,
have my fair share, and I will actually be taking a look at one of my examples of a not so good one as well, which is there. Okay, what just happened? Look at the chat. Alrighty. Leisha, if you're around and willing, I don't have my Mobro with me today to help with management in the messages. I don't really see them when I've got the picture in picture up. But Leisha, if anyone shares a link, would you be so kind as to share or embed that link? If it's a short form, underneath the short form, and if it's a long form, underneath the long form. Thank you kindly.
Got you.
Thank you. Talking about this concept of loops, and we'll look at these examples. The main thing to know is that for short form posts, short form post equals 1 to 2 posts. And then long form post, so you post them all together. Long form post is 3 or more posts as one. For instance, we're looking at this one, storytelling. There we go. Here's the top one. And then here is the next one, and so on. This is a long form post. A short form post is like this one, where there's just one post at the top. That's the key terminology. In short, you want to open one loop in the first sentence. If you can't open a big enough loop, you've lost their attention, and the rest is a waste. So, examples. The first sentence of Karen's in this post is, and it's a short form. There's only one post here, it's not multiple. Alitza, welcome. Great to have you. The hook is, you're not lazy. So, for me, when I'm thinking about this concept of loops and the key premises that I want to open, I'm thinking when I read that, scrolling through the feed mindlessly, not paying too much attention to anything, just having a fun scroll. Okay, I'm intrigued. Why aren't I lazy? Tell me. I want to keep reading. So the loop factor, I'm still coming up with a name for this, but out of 100 means that I am fully hooked. The loop is very open and I need to continue reading it. But let's say if it's 100 out of 100, the loop is fully closed. I don't feel any reason to continue reading this post because it just hasn't hooked me. So for this post, you're not lazy, I'd say that's like a 50.
Can I just ask you a
like-
question?
Please, Marcus.
So, like, in terms of like the loop, if it's more specific, does that make it less loop? So, if you say, for example, you're not a lazy dog owner, that would close the loop somewhat to somebody who's a dog owner, right? Whereas this could be literally anybody in the world.
I see what you're saying. The specificity, it's a factor, but it's not the main one that I want you to think about. I want you to think about the loopiness. That's actually, maybe we'll go with that. The loopiness of it, in the sense that you're just creating an irresistible urge in someone's mind to continue reading your post through the first sentence. Whether that is through specificity or not, it's besides the point. It's just the more curiosity that your first sentence is creating, the more open the loop is. So with Aaron's post, you're not lazy. Yeah, maybe 50 out of 100. If it was 100, I wouldn't feel any reason to continue reading this. If it was 1, I would need closure in my mind. I couldn't close that loop in my mind to get satisfaction from, oh, okay, like I know what Karen was saying now. And that's really what the point is here, that if the loop is closed, you're not giving people a reason to continue reading because it's closed. They've gotten closure. It's like when you have gone through a breakup, right? And maybe they broke up with you. The next day, you're like, what the fuck happened? I thought we had such a good thing going. And now all of a sudden they've broken up with me. I need to know why. And it's going to kill me if I don't figure out why. You just feel like you need to know the answer for why they broke up with you. And that's closing the loop. That's closure. We don't want to give people closure in our hook.
No, we want to treat them badly and get them coming back to us for more.
Keep them keen. For this one, 50 out of 100, it's not fully closed, but I wouldn't say it's fully open. With the next one, for Sam's, the 24-hour game plan. This one, I'm thinking in terms of what Marcus was saying earlier about the specificity versus generality. This is almost as general as it gets because everyone has the same 24 hours in a day. Everyone can relate to it. And the idea of a game plan makes it sound actionable and motivating. So when you see that, I'm thinking, what have you got for me? AI. I want to know what my 24-hour game plan is. And if I was to just get off threads, walk away, I think that would be leaving a pretty big open loop in my mind, subconsciously maybe, because I want to know what my game plan is. And wouldn't at least it make sense for me to continue reading after reading this first line? I would say in terms of closing the loop and the fact that there's a lot more left to go, like the lower the better, the higher the worse. If it was like a 99 out of 100, then this would be like your 24-hour game plan is to sleep well. And then you've got all the rest of this content here. I guarantee you, Sam, this would probably do 20% as well because you've closed a loop in the first sentence. But because you've left it open by saying your 24-hour game plan, obviously that's implying that you're about to give me a lot of useful information that will help me get the most out of my 24 hours. And in order for me to go and close that loop, you're telling me that you should continue reading until the end. And the whole point of this is that if they continue reading until the end, you can capture some engagement with a powerful last line. And if that last line resonates with the person, then they'll go and engage with it, whether that's through liking it, commenting, reposting, quoting, or sharing it. Any questions about that so far? Thumbs up if it's making sense. Mark, it's all good. Love to see it. Great, Sam. Alitza, awesome. Okay. More from Sam. Thank you, my man. All right. So that's Sam's post. Consistency is power. Time well spent equals life well lived. That is the cherry on top there. Well, it's a great last line. Everyone can get around that, and it's motivating, and people can agree with it because it's consistent with the post. But again, had this first sentence not opened a loop, hardly anyone would have gotten to this last sentence. Now let's compare with this one. So it obviously did not as well. It's still fairly fresh. This one was 8 hours ago. This one was 22 hours ago. Safe to say that the first one we looked at will do much better. What is up with this sentence? So this is getting at, and we'll come back to this when we look at the two types of loops. This will make a bit more sense, but it might be easy for you to think, okay, this is opening a loop. I don't know, maybe I should keep reading. This might be a case of having a direct CTA actually having the inverse effect of repelling rather than attracting. But if I was to directly apply it to just the hook alone, which is this first sentence, I would say that I'm indifferent. I'm like, some of what? What is some of this? If I'm just scrolling mindlessly through the feed, I'll probably just see this first sentence and then see this. There's not enough substance in this post of analytics and hook to make me want it from you. That would be my best guess as to why this post maybe hasn't done as well, Sam. In terms of the loopiness, then I'd probably give this a 80 or 90. Remember, higher is worse, lower is better. Mainly because it's not giving me, I think some specificity actually could have helped here, because do you want some of this? It's obviously very vague. In the sense that it's too general, I would probably say that was actually one of the downfalls of it. If you'd made it more specific, then you probably would have attracted more people, which is the irony of niching down. That is 3 examples. Now, here is one that I was searching some of my old posts the other day, and I thought it would be good to look at this as an example of a shit post, and I'll get to that in a second. But the main point I wanted to bring up here was that I posted this on 21st of August, 2023. This is about a month and a bit into my Threads journey. It has 3 likes and no engagement. I mentioned this for 2 reasons. 1, because we're going to look at the hook, but 2, I still have posts that do bad. The only bad post is one that's not posted, but I still have posts that don't perform well. And this was one of my first posts. And I'm sure that if you were to look at the difference between this one and anything I post nowadays, there's a huge difference. I mention this because we all start off not knowing what we're doing, and then we just do more of it and realize slowly, bit by bit, what we're doing. But you can't skip the being shit part. I certainly did. I wanted to break that up for that reason, but also to look at it in terms of why the hook is bad. Leisha, go ahead.
I was just going to say before you move on to the long forms, Marcus did put a short form in the chat, but my Notion's not working, so I can't get in there. I think I need to reset my computer, but I didn't want you to move on without seeing that.
Oh, yeah.
Danny
Okay.
put a short form in there as well.
Beauty. Thanks for that. Lovely. Alitza, please feel free to share any posts that you want us to have a look at. If you haven't already caught on, we're talking about hooks. More than happy to talk about some hooks from posts. If you want to know why certain posts did well or why a post didn't do too well, put the link in the chat. Let me just format that and embed it. But I'll just close the loop on this post. The first sentence is the hook. I'm curious. It's like 100. Who cares? Obviously, only 3 people did. It just doesn't do anything, right? And this is where the debate of you want to just share your unfiltered thoughts on Threads versus you want to share optimized content. It comes down to what your purpose is for Threads. Now, I will assume that because we're all in Saints College, we want to grow on Threads. So the random thoughts thing, they're important and you should still share them time to time. But if your main goal is growth, this just does nothing to achieve that purpose. I would go as far to say it is solely because this first sentence, I'm curious, it's like 99 or 100. It doesn't pique any curiosity in the reader. No one reads this and thinks, cool, I must read this, or walk away from reading the first sentence and think, I have a dying urge to go and read the rest of Lennox's post after reading I'm curious. That is the standard we need to get to here. And that's why this post did very badly. And I probably had about 60 followers at this point, relatively speaking. It's not terrible, but you get the point. Any questions about this one? Got some longs there. Take a look at 2 more shorts. As you were saying earlier, examples are good to consolidate your understanding of some concept.
Yeah.
Beyond today's class, there are 2 ways you can make the most out of what you learn here today. The first is to think to yourself after everything that you post or just before you hit post, how can I leave this loop more open? How can I create a more open loop to get that number down from 80 to under 10? And remember, the lower the number represents a progress bar chart. And the lower the number means there's little progress on the bar chart. The higher the number means it's all the way closed. When you're about to post, ask yourself, how can I make this loop more open? And the other way is when you're scrolling through the feed, don't do it mindlessly. If you're wanting to really grow on threads, do it actively and ask yourself, how good is this hook? Is this opening a loop? You can get granular with this, even down to just a few characters. With David's post here, don't count your followers, make your followers count. The hook here is don't count your followers because it's counterintuitive. It's very easy for people to count their followers because it's measurable, right? So this is opening a big loop for me because I'm thinking, what does he mean? I will go and continue reading. It's obviously much easier when it's a shorter post, but then with a longer one, threads will continue to grow, not because it can replace old Twitter. I'm intrigued here. I want to keep reading it. This is going to make some people mad, but stop treating your business like a lottery. Think about how well these posts that you're scrolling through on the feed are hooking you, and think about how much of a loop they're leaving open. And I promise you, you'll see a pretty clear correlation between those 2. Coming to this one from Marcus. I don't hate the idea of working until 65. All right. Marcus, I'll ask you in the hope that some of the stuff I've said here makes just a little bit of sense. Knowing what you know now, based on the discussion we've had so far, what would you say about the hook in this post in terms of the loopiness on a scale of 1 to 100?
This is a classic where you think it's going to do really well and then it falls on its face. In my head, I was like, I don't hate the idea of working 65. So it's what do you hate the idea of? It's the idea behind that you would draw people in to read more. I actually thought it would well, but it was performed terribly. There's obviously something in it that's not resonating or hitting with people.
Honestly, Marcus, if you're at about 130 followers,
Yeah, 129.
that's not bad. 14 likes when you're at around that point. I had one the other day, and about 10 hours after I'd posted it, it had gotten about 2,500 views and 3. So this is pretty good. But in terms of what the loopiness is, I'm just going to roll with that. Maybe 50 out of 100. If it was 1, you'd feel absolutely forced to continue reading. If it was 100, you have no desire to continue reading whatsoever. Say it's about 50, mainly because you read that hook and you think, fair enough. And you can, I guess half of the people would think, yeah, I can continue scrolling without feeling much of a need to continue reading. But then the other half would think, oh, okay, so what do you hate the idea of? And that's what gets the other half to continue reading. And then they read this stuff here. That breakdown makes sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Cool. Have a look at this other one from Danny. Okay. Love this, Danny. So where are you at the moment? Oh, yeah. So this is definitely an excellent post.
Also, Linux, we got one more short form and one more long in the chat.
Who are they from someone who hasn't shared a post yet?
Yes.
Okay, cool. We'll take a look. I'll add them in. Thanks for that. Oh, that's not the right one. Thanks, Alitza. Love it. All right. I think got one from Mathilde. Mathilde, if you would like to share one, I hope I haven't missed it. Speak now, because otherwise we'll probably leave all the examples as they are. We'll cap it at those examples. That's the short one, all over the place. That's all right. Here's Danny's one. And as we just saw, Danny's got just over 100 followers. And this post got 43 likes, 5 replies, and about 800 views. By every metric, this is done extremely well for where you're at, Danny. Well done. Would love to hear your take on why you think, where would you say this hook is in terms of opening a loop? One being it opens a huge loop and therefore attracts a lot of attention. 100 being it doesn't open, it basically closes the loop and attracts no attention. What would you say it is on that scale?
Yeah, probably between 5 to 10, because a lot of us are introverts at heart, and this is our vent of the thing. Whatever platform we're using, that's our vent to express ourselves without being too vulnerable, I think.
I couldn't agree more. I'd say it's at about a 5. Remember, lower is better, like golf, because I identify as an introvert. I read 8 things introverts crave. I honestly feel I need to continue reading the rest of this because I identify as an introvert, and the word crave has some emotional connotations to it. It's powerful. And I feel like I need to, what do I crave? You're telling me I crave things. You've called me out. Now you're telling me I crave these 8 things. In order for me to make that loop go from a 5 to a 100, I need to get to the 8th thing, right? That is why numbers and listicles work so well. Each thing gradually closes more of the loop. So those are some factors that make this one really effective. It's a combination, like overall, it's the fact that it opens a big loop and it's around a 5 out of 100. Specifically, you've used a number, which tells me that I need to read until the end to close the loop. You've used a direct call out of introverts, and you've used this powerful emotional language of crave.
I think it's also builds a bit of like community, not community spirit. As an introvert, you know what you crave, so you want to see if it's the same as what you crave. And there's that element of, am I the same as this person, that you just want to keep reading. I think it's really good.
This was a great post, Danny. Well done.
That'll be in my feed tomorrow. Thanks.
All right, we've got that. Here's Alitza's. Try not to just give all the answers. Alitza, if you are able to, because I remember last time you had to keep it down, but if you've got any thoughts on the loopiness, so 1 being opens a huge loop and 100 being closes a loop, would love to hear what your number is for this hook in the chat. Alicia, if you could just let me know once there's an answer in there, because I might miss it.
50 to 60.
And this is again relating to the 2 different types of loops, which we'll get to in a moment. For the time being, suffice it to say that a certain percentage of people will see, honestly, this is where punctuation helps. This can be a little boring, but it is pretty important on threads. The colon implies something else will come after the sentence, right? So in that sense, punctuation can be powerful to keep the loop open because it's telling people that in the case of this colon, that there's more to come here and you should keep reading. The fact that there's more text beneath the first sentence says that, but the colon is just a really subtle way of reinforcing that message. So that's something there. And honestly, I'd say that actually led to a lot of people continue reading. It's just the colon alone. If I read this and this was just a full stop or a period, not a colon, I'd probably be more inclined to keep scrolling once I read the first sentence. I'd read this and I'd think, I refuse to settle for a mediocre life, keep scrolling. But instead we say, I refuse to settle for a mediocre life, colon. Okay, why? What is it? What's this all about? And it's a little bit more open. It's getting me to continue reading a little bit more. And that's where what I'd say about this hook is that some people will think this is just completely closed in their mind. They read the first thing and they're like, okay. But some others will see the colon there. And another factor here is also the past tense. So you're saying here, you refused to settle for a mediocre life, which is contributing to how open the loop is. It's making it more open rather than I refuse to settle for a mediocre life. The change in tense slightly changes how loopy it is.
Sick observation, because I refuse. So
Yeah.
then it's like, what happens since then?
Exactly. This is making you think a story is about to be told here.
Yeah.
If you read this, I refused to settle for a mediocre life. It's making you think, what is Alitza doing now? Since she refused, what's happened since? So that's a contributing factor. Compare and contrast that to, I refuse to settle for a mediocre life. It's almost a standalone statement, which actually would work really well as a one-liner, which someone should post. The fact that this is past tense also contributes to how open it is, but it can still go both ways. Hopefully that little breakdown is insightful, Alitza. And now let's take a look at some long forms. I don't think I've missed any short. All right. So Karen's was top of mind because this was shared in the community and it was a certified banger. I'm just going to do a little celebration emoji because it's worthy of the. Oh, now I've lost my screen. Bloody hell. I hate it when this happens. It was worth it. Okay. This is where we've introduced the loop concept and we've said at the top here that in a short form post, which is 1 to 2 posts, which are posted as one, you want to open one loop because you don't have as many characters or words to use in the one post. But in a long form post, as we've already established, it's 3 or more posts as one. And in longs, open 2 loops in the post. Now, I will say, this
Sorry
is
to
why
interrupt.
Oh, go
What?
for it, Marcus.
I don't know if that was where it says 2 loops, just underneath you've got short form post equals 3 or more. Is it supposed to say long?
Thank you very much for that. That was a very important point. Yep. This is all long form now. This is generally why I suggest that long forms can be tricky because they take a lot of time. Like the one I posted just a few hours ago, it took me 2 hours to write. You get better, but it doesn't get easier. The point I'm trying to make here is that in theory, it makes sense that if you struggle to open one loop in a short form post, then you'll struggle to open 2 in a long form. So it makes sense that if you struggle to open one loop in a short form post, you're probably going to find it hard to open 2 in a long form, which is why I generally suggest focus on nailing short form posts up until you get to around 500 followers. It implies that you've got a good idea for how to capture attention in short form. So then you can start applying those learnings to doing the same thing in long form. The longer the content is, the harder it is to hold attention. This is why Mr. Beast is the best in the world at what he does. We're looking at long forms and opening a loop in the first sentence. The objective of this is to get people to read the last sentence in the hook, not the post, but the hook itself. Once we achieve that, by getting them to continue reading to the last sentence, the objective of the last sentence in the hook is to open a second loop and make people think, I need to read all the way till the end of this post. That is why long forms need to open 2 loops. I'm sure we'll have some examples of posts that don't do this, but Karen's post certainly does. And I would say that we read this first sentence, why we avoid certain tasks like cleaning or stopping our scroll. Karen, if you're able to let me know your thoughts on this, great. How much of an open loop do you think that is and why?
It's hard for me to say actually, but I guess
Yeah.
it's really open because I'm not closing it down with saying how or anything.
Exactly. Everyone avoids tasks. There is not one soul of the 8 billion people on this planet that don't avoid certain tasks. Where you say, like cleaning or stopping our scroll. I'd go as far to say that everyone who does scroll can relate to that. It's hard to stop it. And then cleaning, most people don't like cleaning, so we avoid it. This is extremely relatable. And you framed this hook as though it's implying that you actually have the answer to this. Why we avoid certain tasks like cleaning or stopping our scroll. The question mark at the end is implying like, oh, why is that? I want to know. This is a problem that relates to me. And evidently a huge problem. So I'll continue reading to find out. And that is the first loop in Karen's hook of this long form post. And as you were saying, Karen, it's very open on the loopiness scale. I don't know, like a 5 to a 10. It's even probably lower than a 5. It's very compelling because it applies to so many people and it addresses a problem that a lot of people face, and you're implying a solution. So then we continue reading. You were evidently reading as well. I'm currently reading The Mountain Is You, and to introduce an idea that hit me hard. What if the reason we avoid organizing or decluttering isn't about laziness or hating the task itself? The second loop will be the hardest because of what it needs to achieve. The first loop only needs to get people to read to the last one. But the last loop has to get people to read all the way to the bottom of the whole post. And this is so effective because it's a paradigm shift. And it's asking people to question their beliefs or assumptions about what makes us avoid tasks we don't like. What if we avoid organizing or decluttering isn't about laziness or hating the task itself? You're making me think right now, I thought it was. I need to know. Tell me why.
I don't even care about decluttering and I still want to know what's going on.
It's really good. Even just the phrasing of what if, you're framing it as this almost magical possibility that might not even be real or possible. But the way you framed it is such that you're making me think that you're about to share something with me that could honestly change my life. Because none of us like to do the stuff we hate doing. So if you're about to tell me that it's not because I hate it and it's actually something else that will help me solve this problem of procrastination, then I'm all in. And evidently hundreds of thousands of people were as well. So moving on, have a look at Danny's. I'll embed the rest of these. What a ripper. I think that was all of them. Danny's post, 3 mistakes I made in my first 30, 60, 90 days in digital marketing. 30 days. Lack of focus, tried to do everything. Mistake, no clear direction. Lesson, focus on one thing and master it. Now, would love to hear anyone's take on this in applying the 2 loops concept to a long form post. Now, the question is, are both of those loops in this hook? And explain. Anyone got any thoughts?
There's no loopiness on the last line. For sure, it doesn't drive your eyes or make you read the rest of the post. If I had to be really nitpicky on the first line, like the multiple numbers adds a little slight confusion, I think, towards the whole thing. You might lose people there, is what I would, as long as you don't mind me speaking openly, Danny, sorry.
That's all good. I've got pretty thick skin. It's okay.
It's always coming from a place of love in college class. We just want to see each other get better. Honestly, yeah, I'd say the same thing, Marcus. And Danny, that's like an action point. The lesson that says, just randomly saying this, make it something a bit different, but the mistake on day 90 will blow your mind. That's clearly achieving this purpose of making people think they need to read until the end, which is 90 days. And it's also opening a second loop because someone will be thinking, what's going to blow my mind? I want to know. So that would be a sample second loop. And then coming back to what Marcus was saying about the numbers here, an easy fix, I would agree with what you were saying, Marcus, is literally 3 mistakes I made in my first 90 days in digital marketing. It would make it clearer, less cluttered, and the content of the post itself would not change at all. Honestly, Danny, I would suggest you posted about a week ago, maybe even 2 weeks, because I think it only clocks over on the second week. You might have posted this 13 days ago, but I don't think there's anything wrong with you going to post this today, tomorrow, and making those changes. Delete 30/60/ and then put some sort of second loop beneath this sentence. See what happens. Don't want to skip that one. So 2 more, and we'll start closing this loop of the class. We have Marcus's post, which did very well for views, 185,000 views, 14 likes, and it just makes it into a long form. Give it some cheeky likes. All right, Marcus, are the 2 loops there?
So
I'd say it is for sure.
After 15 years in the corporate world, what happens?
Exactly.
There's lots of people in the corporate world. 15 years is a long time. What can I learn from that? Here's the problem. It's not because they aren't good at their job. Everyone knows Emily. To find out what it is, you have to keep reading.
Yeah. Totally agree. First one makes you think what's happened in the 15 years. Also has a implied call out there to everyone who works in the corporate world. They're going to want to know specifically. Also applies in general because this just shows your proof, right? And you were saying that you actually gained quite a few followers from this as well, Marcus.
Relative to the 185K, it's basically nothing, but I think it's about 20 or so, which is huge for me at the time.
Oh, it is. Honestly, yeah, it is. Let me just have a quick skim of the contents of the post because I want to get the context. You've got a CTA to follow you, which is super important. If you want people to do something, just ask. That needs a big value that comes before that, but that's important. But the point that I was getting at is I would say that 90% of the people who followed you because of this post did so because of the proof that you've exhibited in that first sentence. After 15 years in the corporate world, threads assume that everyone is thinking, why should I believe you? Why should I read this? What credibility or authority do you have? This hook answers that question effectively by saying that you've done this for 15 years. And it gives people a reason to take what you've written more seriously. So, as you were saying, Marcus, the first loop after 15 years in the corporate world, I'd say like a 10 out of 100. The loop's still very open. Then we scroll all the way to the bottom here. And as you were saying, there's a little bit of build up. It's not because they aren't good at their job, etc. Everyone knows their value. Humans have a negativity bias because it helps us survive. We should be attuned to seeing some sort of predator in the wild during our hunter-gatherer times. And if we can see something that could threaten our survival, we should have, our minds haven't really adapted to today's society where we think everything's the end of the world. And the reason why I mention all of that is to say that negativity bias means that when you say, here's the problem, I'm much more inclined to read it than if you were to say, here's the benefit. Or I want to know what the problem is because I don't want to encounter it. And those are the two loops. First sentence, last sentence. Simple as that. Any questions about that one, Marcus?
I really appreciate you taking the time to run through it all.
Pleasure. Well done. This did really well.
This was the one I mentioned at the start of the call where it's, fuck, I need to start taking this seriously. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go for gold, dude.
It's got
Alitza, I'm sorry. You probably heard she's got headphones in. Alitza knows that I have shouldn't come as a surprise.
It's all the advice that we see, right? Lean into what works, look to replicate it, double down, test the stuff that doesn't work, and then fix what's wrong. No, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, honestly, that's what it is. And the hope is that knowing the stuff about the loops, one loop in shorts, two loops in longs, one in the first sentence, one in the last of the hook, knowing that stuff, the hope is, I've been doing it I've been testing it out for a long time now, that you just perform better on threads all around. You get more conversions, you get more followers, you get more engagement, all of it. And turning to our last example, and then I'll talk about the types very briefly. So we've got Alitzas, harsh truth, that always works. Motherhood doesn't come naturally to everyone. And that is also a very powerful hook, and it serves the purpose. Like it is a harsh truth, right? So then we go to the next sentence. I was 34 when I became a mum, the first 6 months. Hell, here's why and how to make it easier for yourself. Anyone who's got, Alyssa, you probably know what was angling at here with the two different loops, but if anyone has any thoughts on whether, first question is, does this hook have two loops? Second question is, how loopy are they? Out of what's the loopiness of the first, said loop so many times, of the first sentence in terms of 1 to 100, 1 being massive open loop, need to continue reading, 100 being completely closed, have no reason to continue reading. And then what's the loopiness for the second loop? Anyone have any thoughts?
I think it's very loopy. It's obviously an emotional topic. Lots of people, new parents and stuff like that, struggle and have that sort of those thoughts of it not coming naturally. Like, I haven't done that myself and my wife, etc. So even as a dad, that would probably pique my interest. So really loopy to start with, and how to make it easier for yourself when you're in that first 6 months of parenthood. You will look for anything to make easier for yourself. That's really good.
From a parent's perspective, enough said. There it is. 2 loops. The first one is very effective in the sense that it makes you feel like you actually need to read what a solution is implied after reading the first loop. It makes you think, surely there's something that can help me here. I might feel like a parent and parenthood, or even specifically motherhood, isn't coming naturally to me. Help me. And that's implied in the first loop. And then in the second loop, you specifically say, here's how I will help you. Continue reading. And that's why
just reading it fully through. Sorry, Leonard, keep cutting.
no, that was pretty much it.
Reading it through fully, like that middle sentence as well. There's a juxtaposition there between everybody talks about how great the first 6 months is. And you're like, actually, so you read that and then you get to the end, it's like hell. And oh yeah, actually, it's really hard. There's almost 3 looping sentences in the post.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, well done. Okay, give a little spam of likes. Okay. So to close this loop, I have spoken about the 101, which is, to summarize, shorts, open 1 loop in the first sentence. Longs, open 2 loops, one in the first, one in the last. And the whole point of the first loop is to get people to read to the last loop. The whole point of the last loop is to get people to read until the end of the post. And the lower your loopiness is of each loop, the more effective your hook will be. Lower is like a 1, is perfect. Highest is 100. And it means you've given people no reason to continue reading. And 1 is you've given people every reason to continue reading. Now, this final part of the class is the types of loops. And I've just called these story loops and sentence loops. Now, best way that I can explain this will be through examples and then hopefully come up with some sort of definition. Actually, I'll start with the definition. Story loop is, there we go. Oh, wait. A story that imply. That's an open loop. A loop. Probably got a better definition for sentence loops, but the examples will make it clearer. Let's have a look at Alitza's one that we just looked at, and I'll explain why in a second. That one up there. And then I think I've put them in the right places. So coming to Alitza's post that we're just looking at for long forms, explaining how this is a story loop. So I read this, harsh truth, motherhood doesn't come naturally to everyone. And that's a closed sentence loop because there's nothing in this sentence that directly tells me, like, continue reading to get the rest of this. It's an open story loop because, as we were talking about earlier, Alitza is saying motherhood doesn't come naturally to everyone. I'm thinking, what's the story here? You've introduced a problem of motherhood not coming naturally to everyone. So what's the solution to this problem? That's an example of a story loop. Another one is Karen's. And as we we're saying, this one was about 50-50 in terms of, or rather 50 in terms of closing the loop, but it's also open. And this isn't an open loop in the sense that it's an open sentence loop. It's an open story loop because Karen's implying here that there's something more to me not being lazy. So what am I? What's the story being opened here? Am I instead that will give me closure to you opening a loop in this first sentence? Then we've got sentence loops. And a good example of this is Danny's 3 mistakes I made in my first 90 days in digital marketing. It's a sentence loop in the sense that this sentence clearly says, I need to continue reading this if I want to know what my 3 mistakes are. Because you don't mention the 3 mistakes in the first sentence. And it's implied here by the number, 3 mistakes, and the colon by suggesting that you're going to go and tell me more. So it's in the sentence structure itself that the loop is being opened. Another one, Karen's. We've got why we avoid certain tasks like cleaning or stopping our scroll. It's a sentence loop and also a little bit of story loop, but we'll call it sentence loop because of the question mark here. And you're making me think, why? You've asked a question and you're implying that there will be an answer. And yeah, there is an element of the story loop thing there as well, but both really. This one is definitely a very good example of a sentence loop, Sam, because probably seeing a theme here. The colons are a great way to just open it up, open the loop, and to suggest that you need to continue reading to get the full solution or the full experience here. And Sam said, your 24-hour game plan, colon. The colon in the sentence is opening a loop that's telling people you need to continue reading all the way to the end if you want to know what your 24-hour game plan is. And that's it. We'll say, what's the point of us going through these 2 different types of loops? Actually, Litz's post has really answered that for us. The first sentence here is a story loop. The last sentence, which is the second loop, is a sentence loop. Here's why and how to make it easier for yourself. This probably could have been a colon, but you're saying, okay, I'm about to tell you what is going to help you here. And this sentence is telling me that I need to continue reading if I want that help. And the point of me going through the 2 different types of loops is, for one, for you to be aware of them, and then knowledge is power, for you to use those 2 different types, alternate them, try them out in both in short form posts, and even better, in long form posts, if you're at that stage where you feel like you've got a good grasp on just using one hook, try using one of each in a long form post. That's what I would suggest with the 2 different types of loops. However, if that went over your head, the hooks 201 about story loops and sentence loops, watch the recording of this if you want. But if there is anything, oops, I'm getting very passionate. I just hit my microphone. If there's anything you take away from today, it's the hooks 101, which is this brief recap. Everything you post on Threads must capture attention for it to be effective. The best way to capture attention is to write a great hook. The best way to write a great hook is to open a loop. The more open the hook is after someone finishes reading the first sentence, the more effective the hook is. The more closed the hook is after someone finishes reading the first sentence, the less effective the hook is. In short, open one loop in the first sentence. Lower is better. If it's a 1 out of 100, it means you've opened a huge loop and people need to continue reading in order to close it, because we want closure. If it's a long form post, open 2 loops. One in the first sentence, one in the last. The loop in the first sentence, main point of that is to just get people to read the last sentence of the hook. And that last sentence is the second loop. The objective of that is to get people, give them an irresistible reason to continue reading all the way to the bottom of the post. And my friends, if you can do that, you will win on Threads. It is the most valuable skill you can develop to win on Threads, full stop. And it took me 2,000 hours and 2,000 posts to learn the concept of the loops. Any questions?
Sorry, no questions from me. Just huge thanks.
Pleasure. Such a pleasure, Marcus. I was about
Good.
to write your name, Marcus, and meant to put down questions.
No, this is really cool. I'm hoping to be able to join more of these as time goes on. It's difficult, probably with time zones and stuff like that, but yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I honestly, just so nice to have you come to the call after joining a couple months ago. Always means a lot, and would love to see you in another class and hang out with you in the community. Great to have you here, and hopefully you found it valuable. Anyone else have any thoughts, or questions, comments to add before we wrap up? Anything at all? We have a strict no stupid questions, no such thing as a stupid question policy. Ask away if anything has come to mind. Danny opened a huge can of worms. Oh, Sam, huge. This was the best class. I thought Adam's call was the best. Whew, okay. Damn. All right. Huge compliment, dude. I'll take it. Mathilde, thank you very much. I'm glad you did it. And then
I do have a
breakthrough.
question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Marcus, no, please.
So one of the things that I don't want to say struggle with, because it is literally just typing into a phone, but is the mental aspect of being like, this isn't good enough or whatever, or this is going to flop. And then balancing that piece of thinking like that, but then also saying, well, fuck it, just post it. If we just say fuck it and post it and it flops, how often should we be readjusting, if you like? So one day, and then you assess it and you balance it off against all those points that you've just said in your call. So there's no loopiness. The last sentence, there was no loopiness. How long do you think we should leave it before reposting?
Great question. So this is what I do, and then I'll adjust what I do based on like different contexts. If a long form post does well, I'll literally just go and repost it. Maybe tweak the hook to make it a bit better in every 2 months.
Every 2 months, okay.
Yeah, that's what I do. Short form posts, I'm less strict with it. I don't repost many short form posts unless they do really well. And I don't really have much of a strict time frame there. Probably ends up being roughly the same. That's for good posts, because for so many reasons, like they're your best posts. Most people that follow you or want to hear from you don't see them. And if they do see them again and they remember them, because most people won't remember, they like to be reminded of stuff that they already like, XYZ, all that stuff. But
Yeah.
What about the posts that don't do well? Honestly, give it a week, because if it didn't do well, it obviously means not many people saw it, right? And
Yeah.
it's especially at the start, because not many people are seeing your content. It's the practice phase. It's the experimentation phase. And the whole aim of the start is to just get as much feedback and learning as possible so that you can grow faster and start really doubling down on what works for you. So if I were you and I posted, if you felt like you'd got like pretty good grasp of putting one loop in a short form post and you wanted to start doing more long forms and 2 loops in the top post, and let's say the top one, the post doesn't perform that well, 99% of the time it will be because the hook wasn't that good. I would wait a week, 2 weeks, in between 7 to 14 days, and then change nothing except the hook and see what happens. Try and improve the hook to open a bigger loop in the first sentence and a bigger loop in the last, and just see what happens. Personally done that many times, and it's 100% of the time it works all the time, or whatever that saying is from Anchorman. But yeah. Look, oh shit. Leisha was there, so she would back me up. But we had a cohort call a week or 2 ago, and I posted a thread about Marcus Aurelius. Sharing my screen, but basically, it initially got about 70 likes, and we tweaked the hook, and it got 120 and more views as well. It's not going from mediocre to amazing, but I'd say that's still a substantial improvement. And it was literally the exact same post, like I swear to God, but just a better hook. And I've seen that countless times. I've done it so many times. You'll have to experience it yourself to fully just see how powerful this is. But yeah, Marcus, I would do it. Wait a week or 2 and then just change the hook, see what happens.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. And that was everyone. Yeah. It's so awesome. Thanks so much for the session. Great to see you. Danny, stop the presses. And love there. Oh, yeah, those key points. Awesome. Nothing further from Sam. Mathilde, thank you. And again, Sam, appreciate that comment about the best class, inflating my ego. And a huge can of worms. And then Karen, thank you so much. Awesome. I think that is everything for this class, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. And I look forward to hanging out with y'all in the community and on Threads.